Hearing will come to order. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 5th fiscal year 2022 hearing for the THUD Subcommittee. This hearing is fully virtual, so we're going to address a few housekeeping matters. For today's meeting, the chair or staff designated by the chair may mute participants' microphones when they're not under recognition for the purpose of eliminating inadvertent background noise. Members are responsible for muting and unmuting themselves. If I notice you've not unmuted yourself, I'll ask you if you would like the staff to unmute you. If you indicate your approval by nodding, the staff will indeed unmute you. I remind all members and witnesses that the 5-minute clock still applies. If there's a technology issue, we'll move on to the next member or the next witness until the issue is resolved, and then you can retain the balance of your time. You'll notice the clock on the screen. It'll show how much time's remaining. At 1 minute remaining, the clock will turn to yellow. At 30 seconds remaining, I'll tap the gavel to remind members their time's almost expired. When your time has expired, the clock will turn red. You should finish your sentence and your testimony or your questioning will be over. In terms of the speaking order, we'll begin with the chair and ranking member. Then members will be recognized in order of arrival to the hearing in order of attendance. Finally, House rules require me to remind you that we've set up an email address to which members can send anything they want to submit in writing at any of our hearings or markups. That email address has been provided in advance to your staff. So now let's come to order with our Members' Day hearing. The THUD Subcommittee funds programs that affect every city, county, and state in the country. From building and repairing our nation's affordable housing to fixing roads and bridges, the programs in this bill protect vulnerable populations. They create jobs that further America's investments and its infrastructure investments in particular. Today, we will hear testimony from members on the programs in this bill. We'll use this information to guide the subcommittee as we assemble our fiscal year 2022 bill. So we'll get started in just a moment, but I first want to recognize Ranking Member Diaz-Balart for any opening comments he might have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to hearing from our colleagues, and no opening statement other than I look forward to hearing from my colleagues. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
All right. Thank you, sir. We'll proceed with a series of 5-minute statements from our witnesses, and in other words, our colleagues, since this is Members' Day, and we'll first hear from Steve Cohen of Tennessee. 5 minutes, Mr. Cohen.
Thank you, Chairman Price and Ranking Member Diaz-Balart, for holding this hearing, allowing us to give you our priorities for the fiscal year 2022. My priorities for the subcommittee would make a tremendous impact on my district, including investments in community and housing restoration, improvements to facilities to care for people experiencing homelessness, and federal commitments to make our streets safer for pedestrians and motorists. These community projects are crucial investments in Memphis, and I look forward to working with the subcommittee to help my district become a more equitable and restorative place to live. First, I'm requesting funding for the historic Melrose redevelopment project. This would be used to invest in the Orange Mound community, which was the first African-American suburb built for African-Americans and by African-Americans in the nation. It would start with the redevelopment of the historic Melrose High School, which is vacant at the present time, the building. This project would provide housing for seniors and will create a place for nonprofits to convene and offer numerous community services. It includes space for a genealogy center and a library. It's an ideal location considering it's a former school and neighborhood that was rich in history in itself. This is part of Memphis Mayor Jim Strickland's $200 million Accelerate Memphis Invest in Neighborhoods plan, which would also provide for making catalytic neighborhood investments. The restoration project is needed because it will provide a centrally located library within the neighborhood of nearly 9,000 residents, where there is not a library presently. 99% of those residents are African Americans. 35.8% are below the poverty level, and 64.2% of the residents are at or below the poverty level. Nearly half the population receives food stamps. Median household income is $18,000. This will fill an important need for employers to connect with residents, job seekers, and consumers, as there will be opportunities to meet with people and give them employment. A crucial think tank for small business entrepreneurs, training programs to acquire skills, and needed financial support. The redevelopment of historic Melrose would breathe life back into this Orange Mound community, which is one of the most important in my district in Memphis, the 9th district. It's culturally rich, but it needs help to come back to where it has been. It's got a lot of community members that are very involved and are very proud of being Orange Mound. In fact, they call it Orange Mound, Tennessee. The second major project I'm requesting funding for is the Collins Chapel Correctional Hospital, and they're turning that into a homeless shelter. The facility has a rich history as a former African-American hospital. In the days of segregation, it served the needs of African-American citizens and the surrounding areas where they could not be served by other hospitals. This new recuperative care center will be the first homeless provider to address the needs of medically fragile, unsheltered people discharged from area medical facilities. Without this center, many homeless people will be discharged back to the streets with various physical ailments that could be easily resolved with basic care, including regular nutritious meals, restroom and shower facilities, staff to monitor their activities and their medications, and case management to ensure a pathway to permanent housing. Many studies exist to confirm what we know, that most homeless individuals return quickly to emergency rooms with complications. This places a burden on those medical facilities as well as the entire system, and most of them are uninsured. This recuperative care center will change their lives, and it's a model for others in the Mid-South. Thirdly, I'm requesting funding for a new commercial kitchen and 2 new food truck parking bays for phase 2 of Memphis's hospitality hub. The hub sees 2,500 men, women, and children each year as the region's central point of entry into the Housing and Urban Development HUD Continuum of Care program. The first phase was a day plaza designed as a low barrier point of engagement for individuals experiencing homelessness, and Memphis has a great homelessness problem. It opened early in 2020. It serves the community's primary engagement point and response mechanism for individuals experiencing homelessness during COVID-19. Fourth, I'm requesting an additional $1 million funding for the Memphis Home Repair Program. Recently, Memphis engaged the local initiative support corporation to develop and launch a hybrid home repair program that aids low-income homeowners. With this $1 million, they can get repairs to their homes that are needed and get them back up to code and have a better place to live. In addition to requesting funding to supplement the CDBG shortfalls, I'm requesting that the HUD be directed to reanalyze the community development formulas. They're out of line with our statistics show today and our needs. Lastly, I'm requesting the subcommittee include report language reaffirming support for safe complete streets programs. Complete streets refers to roads and streets designed and operated for bicyclists, motorcyclists, motorists, transit riders, and pedestrians. This is important in keeping up with the times. Thank you, Chairman Price and Ranking Member Diaz-Balart, for the opportunity to discuss these critical matters for my district. I look forward to working with you and delivering a more just and equitable society for all and those in the 9th District.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. We appreciate that testimony, and we'll give it due consideration. I should have said before you started that if you have a fuller statement, and this applies to all witnesses, we'll of course include that full statement in the hearing record. Colleagues, I am not going to go through the usual round of questioning of each of our witnesses since our time is so limited. Let me just say that if anybody has a question, you can indicate, I think, by a raised hand. We have a small enough number to do that. But otherwise, I'm going to just whip right through our witness list. Mr. Diaz-Balart, is that agreeable?
Yes, sir. Totally agreeable. And so a great way to proceed, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Cohen. And we'll now hear from our colleague, Mr. Hagedorn, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman and Mr. Ranking Member, thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate all that you and the subcommittee members are doing in order to provide for the basic infrastructure needs of our country. I'm here today to say that I think we should focus on the basic infrastructure needs. The roads, the bridges, airports, locks and dams, railroads, pipelines, you name it. And also added to that might be the biofuels infrastructure that we need in order to deliver those types of fuels to the American people, upgrading pumps and things of that nature with the E15, for instance. And then maybe not so much focus on the electric vehicles. Let's get down to the basics and do what we need now. And we can do those other things down the road. That's just my opinion on that. But I represent Southern Minnesota, a very agriculture-based district, goes all the way from Wisconsin to South Dakota, and then all across the Iowa border, 21 counties in all. It's mostly agricultural, small business and manufacturing, and medical care, which accounts for 100,000 direct and indirect jobs in our district. As a member of the Agriculture Committee, I can tell you how important it is to have these upgraded roads and bridges to make sure that we can get our goods to market, that we have pipelines that are in use, because if we transport, for instance, crude oil through the Keystone Pipeline, we're doing it safely, efficiently, the most environmentally friendly way possible, and you're not utilizing a lot of trucks and railroad cars, and therefore farmers and others are going to be able to get their goods to market and be able to do what they have to do as efficiently as possible. And then we have locks and dams in 2 counties in my district, Houston and Winona County, and we need to keep upgrading those locks and dams, keep them in good shape so we can get our goods and move them down the Mississippi River. I'd like to report to you about some of the work that you've done and how you've made things happen in southern Minnesota. I appreciate the funding streams that you've provided, for instance, in the area of build grants. And Highway 14 is a project in our district that we've been trying to complete for over 50 years. And last year we were able to acquire a $25 million build grant and work with our state government, all in bipartisan fashion, to complete a segment from Nicollet to New Ulm. And that is going to provide not just safe transportation, but efficient transportation and create jobs in that area. And it's good for all of southern Minnesota. So we appreciate what you've done there. Also last year, we were able to acquire a grant that has helped a short line railroad in our district called Ellis and Eastern. And they move ethanol products, they provide finished pork products. And so we're going to upgrade the track and make sure that they can move that quicker. And again, it's all about efficiency and helping our businesses prosper. And lastly, I'd like to focus on some airport projects that because of your work, we've been able to get funded, and we're going to start work on. In the city of Rochester, which is our largest city, home of the Mayo Clinic, I was just at a dedication last week with Senator Klobuchar and others, and we're going to upgrade that airport with a new runway, and we're going to enhance the lighting system. And that's very important because a lot of people don't realize that Mayo Clinic, about 10% of their workforce, is all about state-of-the-art testing. We saw some of this come into play during the coronavirus pandemic, and a lot of testing samples, tissue samples, and organs for transplant fly in and out of Rochester every day. And so when some of that's time sensitive, we need to make sure that all those samples and all those things can fly in under any weather conditions. That's why this project is so important, especially with the upgrading the lighting system. Another airport project that is ongoing because of your work, and appreciate the cooperation, is in the city of Mankato, Minnesota. Mankato Regional Airport is actually our second busiest airport in the entire state at this time, and we're going to upgrade the taxiways. We have another project that we have in the works that we'd like to get completed down the road, and that is to build a control tower or to have a digital tower for the Mankato Airport. And that's really important because North Star Aviation and Minnesota State Mankato, they've upgraded their pilot training program there at the university. It's become very busy, and for safety and other issues, we'd like to get that down the road. Other types of projects that might be of use in our district would include crosswind runway in New Ulm and runway improvements in the city of Jackson, smaller airports, but very important. So we appreciate all that you're doing, and we look forward to working with the subcommittee moving forward. Lastly, I'd say that the electronic logging devices, if you could maintain that prohibition of spending money in order to implement those for agricultural purposes, that would be very important. We have all sorts of hogs and other types of livestock moving in and out of our district every day. And I think that would just exacerbate a problem we have now with the trucker shortage and everything else. So if you could maintain that prohibition, that would be my request. And lastly, just in conclusion, thank you for all you do. I appreciate this opportunity to advocate for some of the projects that we have back in southern Minnesota, and to let you know that you have a colleague here that will continue to work cooperatively in order to make these improvements in infrastructure across our country. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hagedorn. Mr. Diaz-Balart, any questions?
No, thank you. Very thorough presentation. Thank you, sir.
Yes, we're glad to hear from you. And we'll next hear from our colleague from Texas, Ms. Escobar. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Price and Ranking Member Diaz-Balart, for this chance to discuss some of the priorities I have before the THUD Subcommittee. This year's community project funding process was a great opportunity to engage with El Pasoans who are on the ground and know the needs of our region best. I'm proud to have submitted 3 projects to your subcommittee for consideration. The first project is the solar energy project at El Paso International Airport. As the country continues to transition to a net zero economy to combat the climate crisis, we need to be providing economically disadvantaged communities like mine the means to also make that transition. This project would help our region by allowing El Paso International Airport to begin construction of their first on-site solar installation. The installation represents a monumental step in El Paso International Airport's efforts to address climate change and decrease their CO2 footprint. I hope this solar project will pave the way for many more like it. The second project I'd like to highlight is the Paso del Norte Trail. This trail is meant to run throughout our entire county and will give El Pasoans access to a county-wide walking trail, combating health inequities by providing a space for people to lead an active lifestyle. Additionally, by utilizing green infrastructure design elements, the trail will be able to reduce urban flooding exacerbated by climate change. This is one facet, but a key portion of the trail, from the entrance of the El Paso Zoo to Tobin Place. The third project, the Casitas Community Project, will address homelessness for those who are 18 to 24 years old in the El Paso region. While there are many housing options for those experiencing homelessness, this is a population that is typically underserved and too often completely left out by homelessness services. Funding the Casitas Community Project would allow the El Paso Center for Children to acquire land and build a 15-unit tiny home community for individuals who are 18 to 24 years old. This model, which is based off of other successful projects in cities like Austin, would give these young adults access to short or long-term housing while also surrounding them with staff and counselors who can help them navigate adult systems they may otherwise be unprepared to interact with. This will prevent them from falling into chronic homelessness and give them the best chance available to succeed. Finally, I would like to impress upon the subcommittee the need to ensure that any funding being appropriated, especially funding designated for local governments and entities like community project funds, makes it to the designated recipients. As you may know, for months, my governor, Texas Governor Greg Abbott, has held critical COVID relief funds hostage. This means entities like schools had been unable to properly spend relief funds on COVID safety measures because they had no access to that funding, or they were unable to reimburse themselves. While Governor Abbott recently released some of these funds, he is also holding up federal funds to help local governments with migrants arriving at our nation's front door. It is clear that strong language needs to be put in place to prevent the blocking of federal funds and help in states like mine. I urge the subcommittee to take this into consideration while you are drafting the final bill. We have to protect the will of the Congress. We have to protect these federal funds. We have to make sure that they are getting to the local governments that need them the most. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. I look forward to collaborating with the subcommittee as you continue to draft the final appropriations bill. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Escobar. Do any members have questions of our witness? If not, we'll thank you and turn to our next witness, Mr. Case of Hawaii. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Aloha and mahalo for the opportunity to update the committee on key transportation and housing needs for my home state of Hawaii, specifically the Native Hawaiian Housing Block Grant Program and accelerating safety and community disruption concerns arising from commercial tour helicopter and small aircraft operations. The Native Hawaiian Housing Block Grant Program is modeled after the Indian Housing Block Grant Program with modifications to address the specific housing needs and circumstances of Native Hawaiians, the indigenous peoples of our country whose homeland is Hawaii. These funds provide critical financial assistance for Native Hawaiian families to obtain new homes, make renovations, build community facilities, and receive housing services, including counseling, financial literacy, and other critical resources to address housing disparities. Your support for this program is needed now more than ever. Native Hawaiian households in Hawaii are more likely to be low income than non-Native households, and home ownership rates for Native Hawaiians in Hawaii are even lower. For example, in Honolulu proper, 38% of Native Hawaiians own their own homes compared to 48% for non-Native peoples. This disparity also exists in other areas of the state where 51% of Native Hawaiians own their homes compared to 60% for non-Native peoples. Your Continued support for the Native Hawaiian Housing Block Grant Program is needed to ensure our nation can reverse longstanding housing inequalities and build stronger communities for generations to come. I also ask for the committee's support to address the rapidly increasing safety and community disruption concerns from commercial tour helicopter and small aircraft operations. In many parts of the country, but particularly in my Hawaii, these operations that have accelerated rapidly in recent years. Yet regulatory capacity and commitment by the Federal Aviation Administration have been seriously deficient with widespread negative consequences. Like many other highly trafficked locations across the country, communities across Hawaii have experienced a significant increase in ground disruption from noise and other effects of constant commercial aviation operations, especially tour helicopters and small aircraft operations. These include our precious national parks, which are disturbed and destroyed by thousands upon thousands of tour overflights a year. In their case, the National Parks Air Tour Management Act requires the FAA and the National Park Service to create air tour management plans or achieve voluntary agreements for mitigating these disruptions. But such disruptions are equal, if not greater, to communities and other locations beyond national park boundaries. In some cases, the FAA and the operators have adopted air tour common procedures manuals, which have had some limited effect on mitigating such disruptions. But these are voluntary and in Hawaii have been abandoned by the FAA and operators. The FAA appears to be unclear as to whether its statutory and regulatory jurisdiction beyond national park boundaries encompasses a responsibility to mitigate noise and other community disruptions, or for that matter, whether it even has the authority to pursue air tour management plans, common procedure manuals, or other means towards time, place, and manner restrictions, or to impose such restrictions absent such agreements. My requested report language of this subcommittee would acknowledge and support worsening community concerns in this area. It would remind the FAA that its responsibilities encompass such concerns by directing the FAA to formally respond on its efforts to date and position as to its statutory and regulatory authority. If the FAA does not think it has authority to address these concerns, the FAA would be requested to help identify the regulatory and legal barriers and legislative solutions. I want to extend my warmest mahalo for your leadership for our nation's transportation, housing, and urban development, and for your consideration of my Hawaii's critical needs in the upcoming fiscal year. Aloha, and I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Case. Seeing no questions, we'll turn to our next witness, Mr. Mrvan of New Jersey. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
I would like to thank Chairman Price, Ranking Member Diaz-Balart, and all the members of the House Appropriations Subcommittee on Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development and related agencies for holding today's hearing. I am Frank Mrvan of Indiana 1st Congressional District. My primary purpose for testifying today is to discuss the importance of the Capital Investment Grant Program. As you all are aware, my predecessor for the 1st Congressional District of Indiana, Chairman Pete Visklowski, was instrumental in supporting the Capital Investment Grant Program and its transformational projects in Northwest Indiana. Specifically, Capital Investment Grant Programs funding has allowed Indiana's 1st Congressional District to successfully secure 2 full funding grant agreements in this account for the South Shore Rail Line West Lake Corridor Project and the Double Track Project. My district is adjacent to the commercial capital of the Midwest, the great city of Chicago, and these projects seek to benefit residents and businesses by reducing travel times and increasing the frequency of commuter transit in my district. The successful implementation of these investments will incentivize new development and workforce housing and ultimately provide our current and next generations with new and exciting opportunities to live, develop a career, and raise a family in Northwest Indiana. I wholeheartedly believe that the Capital Investment Grant Program is a staple for communities across our nation, and each year this program continues to demonstrate the positive impact it has on the lives and livelihoods of everyday Americans. I appreciate the robust allocations directed to the Capital Investment Grant Program in prior years and the demonstration of this subcommittee's commitment to invest in advancing our nation's infrastructure. As you work to draft your bill for fiscal year 2022, I would encourage the continued steadfast support for this program. Thank you again to Chairman Price, Ranking Member Diaz-Balart, all the members of the subcommittee, and the subcommittee staff for your dedicated work in holding this hearing. With that, I yield back my time. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Mrvan, and my apologies for getting your state wrong. I guess we'll give bonus points for that. We certainly remember the outstanding service of your predecessor on this committee for many years. So we welcome you and we thank you for your testimony. Any questions for the witness? If not, we'll thank you and turn next to Ms. Schrier of Washington State and recognize Ms. Schrier for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Price, Ranking Member Diaz-Balart, for hosting today's Member Day. I really appreciate the opportunity to testify about my priorities and current concerns as a representative of Washington's 8th Congressional District. Washington State has a diverse set of housing, transportation, and development needs. In Washington's 8th District, my district depends on a variety of programs to keep our communities housed, connected, and healthy. I'm submitting a longer letter to address all of these concerns, but I want to highlight just a few for you today. First, I want to bring your attention to 2 important projects. The first one is the Senior Hub Facility improvements in Enumclaw. The funding for this program would be used for revitalization of the Enumclaw Senior Center. This building has housed programs for seniors since 1983, although the building itself dates back to 1927. The program has grown from one daily meal to a robust variety of programs and services that meet the needs of a growing aging population. With these grant funds, the program can make needed physical structure and safety improvements, including earthquake retrofits, replacement of outdated window glass, and safe and ADA accessible entrances. Enumclaw Senior Center is used heavily by older adults and their families. The center also serves seniors who are homebound as the only site in King and Pierce counties providing hot, home-delivered meals. Seniors are often isolated at home, especially during the pandemic, and senior centers like this one support healthy aging in place and provide important social opportunities for seniors. The second project that I want to highlight is called A Place for Alice in Leavenworth, Washington. This project funds affordable housing that will be preserved as affordable housing through a land trust designation. Future buyers gain access to affordable housing, maintain the property, can build wealth, and later sell the property. And in addition to the housing itself, these funds will support construction and rehabilitation of a playground, sports field, and a pool that will serve the broader community. Nearly half of the residents in these 3 communities that are served by this project are living in poverty or are ALICE, asset limited, income constrained, and employed. And the median rent burden is disproportionately high because this is a tourism-based community. Community needs assessment identified access to healthy year-round recreation as a community need. This investment of federal dollars would produce 3 workforce housing units, 1 to 2 sport fields, 1 ADA accessible playground, and 1 year-round pool. This project creates 16 to 24 permanent jobs, and through a pilot youth build program, A Place for Alice aims to train 8 to 14-year-olds in construction trades, leading to 1 to 4 permanent jobs. Additionally, the newly expanded pool programming will lead to another 15 to 20 permanent positions. These types of community investments are important not only for housing, but for the connective services that housing provides. By investing for a place for seniors to break bread and socialize, we help improve their quality of life. And by providing low-income families with access to a playground and pool, we create jobs and an opportunity to socialize, exercise, and build community. My district and Washington State as a whole desperately need more housing. Today, Washington State has a shortage of 157,461 rental homes, over 5,000 of which are in my district. We also specifically need support for veteran housing programs, as there are more than 1,500 homeless veterans in Washington State. I firmly believe it is our responsibility to ensure that those who served our country have stable housing and a good quality healthcare. That's why I'm supportive of the HUD-VASH program. This program combines rental assistance in the form of a HUD voucher with case management and supportive services. By combining services, the HUD-VASH program helps homeless veterans regain self-sufficiency and addresses the factors that led to their homelessness in the first place. Finally, as a pediatrician and a mom, I'm concerned about lead poisoning in children in their own homes. The CDC estimates that 535,000 children ages 1 to 5 years in the US have blood lead levels above the safe level. Exposure can lead to serious neurological damage, developmental delays, learning and behavior problems, and this will affect all of our communities and all of our futures. So thank you for your leadership during this process and for your attention to the needs of my district and the country. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Schrier. Any questions for the witness? If not, we'll thank you for your testimony and turn to our next witness, Ms. Tenney of New York, recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I would like to thank you, Chairman Price and Ranking Member Diaz-Balart and distinguished members of the House Transportation, Housing and Urban Development and Related Agencies Appropriations Subcommittee for holding today's hearing. I am grateful for this opportunity to advocate for funding priorities that matter to my constituents and my community. New York's 22nd Congressional District stretches from the shores of Lake Ontario in the north to the Pennsylvania border in the south. It includes cities like Utica and Binghamton, as well as so many historic villages and towns. Many of the communities I represent are rural and suffer from a lack of resources. While states across the country face aging infrastructure, in New York, which is an original colony, our challenges are specifically dire. Upstate New York, once a manufacturing hub along the famed Erie Canal, where the first shovel was put into the ground in my district, is in desperate need of greater revitalization and investment. That's why today I'm honored to highlight 4 projects that would greatly benefit my community and bring hard-earned taxpayer dollars back to New York State in a positive way. The first project is a pedestrian bridge located at Utica Harbor in the city of Utica. In the early 1800s, construction of the Erie Canal kicked off the beginning of the Industrial Revolution in the Mohawk Valley. For decades, it was an important route for barge traffic carrying crops and goods from the Great Lakes and the rest of the world. Utica Harbor was an important stop along this route, but that was then. Today, this route has dried up and the harbor has been cut off from the city of Utica. I'm advocating for a pedestrian bridge to once again link downtown Utica to the harbor, which would open up this area to greater economic growth and allow more people to easily access this community resource and historic landmark. The second project I want to highlight is the Griffith Woodhaven Revitalization Project in the city of Rome. This initiative has strong community support and aims to revitalize more than 100 acres of former military housing near what was once the great Griffith Air Force Base into a new, vibrant, mixed-use community. As you know, Griffith Air Force Base was shuttered in 1995 following the base realignment and closure process. The loss of this base devastated my community, making the need for greater federal investment today even more critical. The refurbished housing stock will boost the growing job market within the Griffith Business and Technology Park, which today is anchored by the Air Force Research Laboratory's Information Directorate, as well as the Defense Finance and Accounting Agency. For these institutions to be competitive and achieve their important missions, we must continue to invest in this area's development, particularly in the area of housing. The third project I want to highlight is located in the city of Binghamton, New York, the original home of IBM. After decades of use, the city's current fire headquarters, located within the city of Binghamton, has been deemed structurally unsound. This has put a huge strain on the city's ability to respond reliably to local emergencies, and this has been particularly noticeable in our pandemic last year. The city has proposed a new building, state-of-the-art facility that will greatly benefit our community. The new facility will include more space to house equipment and will also provide additional protections to the brave first responders I represent, including housing a new decontamination room to prevent hazardous toxins from spreading throughout the facility. Finally, I must emphasize the importance of investing in our local community spaces, which is why I support funding for to renovate the H. Douglas Barclay Courthouse in the village of Pulaski This courthouse is the oldest building in Oswego County, still used for its initial purpose. I've actually done cases in this courthouse. In addition to serving as a courthouse, the local landmark also houses the Town of Richland offices, a satellite office for the Department of Motor Vehicles, the County Health Department, and other services and resources for the community. However, after years of withstanding very harsh New York winters, including average snowfalls of 12 feet, and sometimes meeting the record across the country, this building is in desperate need of critical and costly maintenance to maintain its safety. Without these repairs, the building risks closing altogether, which would prevent those in my community from accessing these vital services with no other alternatives. Transparency and accountability were two critical factors that drove my support of these projects. I'm committed to ensuring my federal funding, any federal funding brought back to our region is spent transparently and responsibly. As with any federal program, community project funds must adhere to the highest standards, and I will hold community beneficiaries accountable. The projects I am supporting today here were rigorously reviewed, including extensive consultations with a variety of stakeholders. They have strong buy-in from the community as well as clearly demonstrated benefit to my district. As many of you likely know, New York State taxpayers pay more to the federal government than the state receives in return. I will always advocate on behalf of my community and fight to return tax dollars to New York. Thank you again, Chairman Price, Ranking Member Diaz-Balart, subcommittee members, and I know your hardworking staff who have a lot of challenges this year. This is going to be an amazing year. And also, just for the chance to testify before you, I appreciate your time and your effort, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Tenney. Seeing no questions, we will thank you for your testimony and turn next to Mr. Griffith of Virginia. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Price and Ranking Member Diaz-Balart, thank you for providing me the opportunity to highlight matters of great importance to my district and the coal fields of Appalachia as you move forward in the appropriations process. One project I have submitted this year for your consideration is a pre-engineering study along a portion of the Coalfields Expressway, US Route 121. Now, the Coalfields Expressway and in West Virginia, I think they call it the King Coal Highway, but that has been designated since 1995 as a congressional high priority corridor and is a proposed 4-lane highway that would provide a much needed and more efficient pathway through the Coalfields region of Southwest Virginia and Southern West Virginia. So what happens is this road would go from Beckley, West Virginia, down through West Virginia into my district, the 9th District of Virginia, and connect it up with 23 and then 26, which connect to Kingsport and Johnson City, which connects the northern part of the district or the roadway to Interstate 64 and Interstate 77. And on the southern end, you would end up with being able to connect to 81, or a faster way to connect to 81 for much of the region, Interstate 81, and to Interstate 40. So this pre-engineering work will focus on location analysis and engineering to assist with the planning, budgeting, and design of 2 sections of the proposed highway. And by providing the safe and rapid access to communities along the corridor, it will greatly improve interstate commerce between disadvantaged Appalachian regions of Virginia, West Virginia, and Kentucky. Now, as you all know, this is an area that's been ravaged by economic depression with the exit of much of the coal industry. And what people say is they say, okay, the coal industry's dead. What we need you to do is reinvent yourselves, come up with something new. The problem is that our road systems are so bad, and that most of these counties, or a large part of our coal producing counties, have no access to an interstate highway or even a 4-lane highway for part of it. And so this would connect all that together. And for those rare areas where we do have some flat land, attract manufacturing. So it would provide us with an economic lifeline, bringing in commerce and tourism to the area. The current roadways would benefit as well and make connectors. But it is extremely important that we work on this. This expressway would bring much needed commerce into the area and give us a chance to bring in some manufacturing. And so to give you an idea, this whole roadway would cost approximately $3 billion. I'm not asking for that, obviously. This little project, which moves things along, would be $2 million. But under the Virginia Highway Funding Formula, what happens is that they look at all this and they look mostly at road miles, but they also look at what money's already been invested. And in many areas of the state, some of the times the local government will be able to invest some money and move the project up the list to be funded in Virginia. but my congressional district ranks 422nd for median household income out of the 435 congressional districts, and that's according to 2018 census data. So the local communities can't help themselves. And this part of my district, which is the Coalfields part, is the most economically distressed area of my congressional district. So I would hope that you all would consider that, because, you know, even though Virginia receives federal funding for highway projects, based on that formula, a large amount of that money goes to Northern Virginia, Richmond, and Norfolk. And look, I have nothing against those regions of the Commonwealth, but this small amount of funding is really needed to help Coalfields bring in jobs and opportunities. So we're going to reinvent ourselves, but we need some help to do it. And I would appreciate your help in doing that. I also want to bring up another project I've submitted also in the Coalfields, and that is in Dickinson County, a county that a couple of years ago, they were looking to build a new school. They could only find 2 tracks flat enough that they could build a school on in the entire county. And the gateway community of Trammell is important in this community. And it was a coal camp built in 1980 as one of the earliest coal camps in Appalachia. It consists of virtually identical wood frame, 1-story, 4 or 5 room houses built along the narrow valley floor between the bases of 2 steep bordering mountain slopes. And I've submitted some pictures y'all can look at when you take this up. But funding would be used to address housing and community infrastructure in these rural, predominantly low-income neighborhood in the Coalfields of Appalachia. There's already work underway in this community, and this funding would provide economic development opportunities for this gateway community to the county, as well as affordable housing rehabilitation and other infrastructure improvements for residents. I appreciate your time and consideration. These are 2 important projects to my district, and I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Griffith. We appreciate your testimony and take it under consideration.
Thank you.
Seeing no questions, we'll turn to our next witness, Mr. McGovern of the state of Massachusetts. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Chairman Price and Ranking Member Diaz-Balart. I want to talk to you about 3 issues. First, I ask that you provide at least $50 million to establish a nationwide grand family housing pilot program. Over the past year, the COVID-19 pandemic has had a profound impact on multi-generational families all across the country. At the beginning of the pandemic, for example, it was generally advised that grandparents should physically isolate themselves from their grandchildren. But that is nearly impossible for elderly caregivers to distance themselves from the children that they are raising. A new study by Generations United finds that the number of Americans living in a multi-generational household has nearly quadrupled over the past decade. And we saw a marked increase in grandparent raising children due to the opiate epidemic. The epidemic still rages, and it has been compounded by the pandemic. Right now, there are over 2.6 million children being raised by their grandparents, and that number is expected to grow. Shockingly, less than 1/3 of eligible grandfamilies receive housing assistance. The majority of subsidized and market rate senior residences do not permit children to live in their buildings. As a result, almost half of every grandparent-led low-income household spends more than 50% of their income on rent. Clearly, something needs to change. Over the past few years, I've spent time participating in community roundtables with constituents who find themselves in impossible situations. Often on fixed incomes, these individuals do not hesitate to take in their grandchildren and provide for them because they love them. As a result, they are often forced to find additional work or move out of their current housing. Yet, these grandparents do not complain or regret their decisions. I believe that we can help make their lives easier by providing them with safe, appropriate housing that covers each family member's individual needs. We've already seen this model work successfully in Congress's own backyard. Plaza West opened in Washington, D.C. in late 2018 as the first affordable housing community for seniors, families, and grandfamilies. 50 units have been set aside for grandfamilies with income levels between 30 to 40% of the area median income. Plaza West has a range of amenities, including activity spaces and community rooms for kids. Second, I want to talk to you about is to provide increased funding for radon testing and mitigation program located in HUD's Office of Lead Hazard Control in Healthy Homes. Radon is invisible, odorless gas, as you all know, and is the leading cause of lung cancer among non-smokers. The numbers of people who die each year from lung cancer caused by radon exposure exceed 21,000. This is a preventable danger, and by providing technology to monitor and mitigate radon in homes, we can help reduce the threat that radon currently poses on American lives. Unfortunately, HUD does not currently require radon testing in public housing units, leaving residents vulnerable to radon exposure and lung cancer. And to ensure the safety of families in public housing, I urge you to increase funding above the FY 21 enacted level for a federal radon testing and mitigation program. This is an easy fix for a life-threatening situation. Finally, I just want to bring your attention to another issue that I've been passionate about since I first came to Congress, and that is ensuring that we keep our roads safe by opposing any increase to federal truck size or weight limits on interstate highways. I respectfully ask the committee to affirm Congress's longstanding position that allowing longer or heavier trucks on our roads, whether through industry or state-based exemptions, presents an unacceptable risk to motorists' safety and an unnecessary burden on our roads and bridges. I've talked to too many families who have lost loved ones in truck-related accidents. Stakeholders from highway safety groups to law enforcement organizations, representatives of towns and cities, and even truck drivers themselves oppose an increase to truck size and truck weight. And the last time the Department of Transportation studied this issue was during the Obama administration, and they determined that the issue needed much more comprehensive review before any size or weight increases should even be considered. So again, I would be grateful for the committee's assistance on this traditionally bipartisan issue. I appreciate what you're doing here today and listening to all of us, and I yield back my time.
Thank you, Mr. McGovern. Any questions? All right, we will welcome any additional testimony you want to offer, a full statement for the record. And we'll turn to our next witness, recognized for 5 minutes, Mr. Swalwell.
Well, thank you so much, Chairman Price and Ranking Member Diaz-Balart. Thanks for the opportunity to share my thoughts with you as the subcommittee works to provide appropriations for transportation, housing, and urban development for fiscal year 2022. I think one of our goals has to be, especially in congested areas in America, how do we have people spend less time in their cars and more time at home with their families? And the project I'm going to talk to you about will do that. You know, for the first time in 2 decades, ASCII, the American Society of Civil Engineers, has assessed U.S. infrastructure and given us a grade that is above the D range. Nationally, our infrastructure finally is at a C-, and under your leadership, we can ensure the country builds back better. My home state of California is the 5th largest economy in the entire world. And leading into the COVID-19 crisis, we had 118 months of job growth. But my state has taken its hit in the headlines. It's poised to, while it's taken the hit in the headlines, it's poised to lead the nation in transportation innovation, housing policy, and urban and sustainable development. Our transportation system today connects 40 million people with jobs, housing, and opportunity. And over the next 30 years, that number will grow to 45 million people. And we've set ambitious and innovative goals in the state to connect people safely while also reducing carbon emissions and reducing them to 80% below the 1990 levels. The project I was talking about is a 42-mile, 7-station passenger rail line that will connect people to housing and jobs. It goes through 3 congressional districts. It's called Valley Link. It's an example of how California is leading the way on equitably connecting communities with jobs, growing the economy, and promoting sustainability. In my community project funding request, I asked for $5 million for Valley Link, as did my neighbor to the east, Congressman Josh Harder, a colleague of yours on the Appropriations Committee. It spans 3 congressional districts, as I said, and will establish rail connectivity between the Bay Area Rapid Transit System, known as BART, in the San Francisco Bay Area, and the Altamont Corridor Express, which is known as ACE, the commuter rail lines in Alameda County, California, which links 500 miles of commuter and intercity rail with more than 130 stations in what is known as the Northern California mega region. It connects the region's workforce to affordable housing. It provides a public transit option for 97,000 San Francisco Bay Area workers who live in San Joaquin County, who drive to work, and these commute times can be an hour and a half to 2 hours each way. Imagine how much time is spent away from the family and how many carbon emissions happen because of that. It would reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 30,000 metric tons by 2040 and provide, here, this is the real impactful number, 22,000 jobs during construction and support an additional 400 jobs a year post-construction. So here's just some of the dollars and cents of the investment. With the $5 million investment that Congressman Harder and I are requesting, it connects jobs, workers, and communities, and the blueprint will transform this passenger line into a national model of environmental sustainability and support service expansion to some of the state's most disadvantaged communities. In addition to advancing Valley Link's sustainability blueprint, I request that you make communities in the East Bay of California better for children and family by also providing $1.7 million for the Alameda County Transportation Commission's Safe Routes to Schools mini grant program, which will provide grants to support bicycle and pedestrian safety and access improvements, $2 million to finalize the blueprint for a bicycle and pedestrian bridge at the intersection of Crow Canyon and the popular Iron Horse Recreation Trail in San Ramon, where sadly we have lost multiple people to traffic fatalities. $1 million to build Veterans Park in downtown Livermore, which will be located alongside a 130-unit affordable housing development. $1.5 million for the Stack Center in Hayward, which will provide wraparound health, education, recreation, and career training services, and $750,000 for Covenant House, California, Hayward Village, to complete construction of a 30-bed emergency housing facility for youth. These smart and equitable projects span my congressional district and would be models for transportation, housing, and development for 21st century communities. Again, I thank you for your time. The people of my district are worth investing in, and the return on that investment is jobs, housing, and a reduction of carbon emissions. And I appreciate the committee giving me an opportunity to make the case. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Swalwell. Any questions? We appreciate your testimony, and we'll now turn to Mr. Rose of Tennessee. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Price and Ranking Member Diaz-Balart. I represent Tennessee's 6th District, a beautiful area in Middle Tennessee made up of 19 counties. My district is over 50% rural, and today I am advocating for 2 major priorities of rural and agricultural communities back home and across the country. My testimony will include or will cover both the need to provide critical funding for the Appalachian Development Highway System, as well as a 1-year delay in implementation of electronic logging devices for livestock haulers in the Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development and Related Agencies Appropriations Bill for fiscal year 2022. The Appalachian Development Highway System, or ADHS, was created in 1965, the year I was born, to stimulate economic development by connecting isolated areas of Appalachia to the interstate system and the nation's integrated transportation network. The project allows those isolated areas to benefit from greater access to the region, as well as to broader domestic and global markets. In all, 3,090 ADHS miles have been authorized by Congress, and over 90% of those miles are now open to traffic. It is critical for Congress to now honor the decades-old federal commitment by supporting the goal of completing in a timely manner the remaining 10% of the ADHS system. In fiscal year 1999, ADHS was transitioned from a directly appropriated program to an eligible activity under the Highway Trust Fund. However, since that change, project completion has slowed dramatically. In those 21 years, only 15% of the authorized miles were completed. The federal dollars going into this program have not gone to waste. The ADHS corridors completed between 1965 and 2015 have created or supported over 168,000 jobs with nearly $7.3 billion per year in added worker income. These corridors have also had substantial impacts on the accessibility of Appalachian communities to labor markets, truck delivery markets, and intermodal terminals. Finally, according to the publication Economic Analysis of Completing the Appalachian Development Highway System, published by the Appalachian Regional Commission in 2017, completing the ADHS will enable the combined economy of the 13 Appalachian states to produce and sell 8.7 billion more in goods and services per year, generate over 4.2 billion more in gross regional product, and pay workers nearly 2.7 billion more in wages, while adding over 46,000 more jobs. We must complete this highway system and do so in a timely manner. Additionally, I urge you to include language in the fiscal year 2022 THUD appropriations bill that would provide a 1-year delay on implementation of electronic logging devices, or ELDs, for livestock haulers. Every day, nearly 500,000 cattle and over 500,000 hogs are moved throughout the United States. However, livestock haulers across the country have the difficult task of ensuring motorist safety while also tending to the health and welfare of the animals that they are transporting. Unfortunately, the hours of service rules do not adequately accommodate this subset of the industry. A 1-year delay would allow time for industry members and authorities' concerns to be addressed, as well as receive sufficient training to ensure uniform compliance and enforcement. To further combat this issue, I have introduced a bipartisan piece of legislation with Representative Darren Soto that would provide a year-round exemption for hours of service rules for agricultural and livestock haulers. Although our legislation would solve this problem, a 1-year delay is a good first step toward protecting the welfare of livestock as well as motorists. Chairman Price and Ranking Member Diaz-Balart, I thank you for allowing me to testify before you today, and I look forward to working with you and the rest of the subcommittee on achieving these important priorities. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rose. We appreciate your testimony. Seeing no questions, we'll turn to our final witness, our colleague from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee, recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the ranking member, Diaz-Balart. I will list a number of priorities, but I will emphasize some very crucial moments. Let me also emphasize community projects as well that have been submitted. Thank you for your kindness dealing with the empowerment and economic development in hard to serve areas and programs dealing with construction in schools. Let me indicate that I support $2.0 billion for the transportation investment generating economic recovery. The Tiger grants, my support for that is a strong cooperation it encourages between agencies and jurisdictions. I support the $2.5 billion for New Starts program. Houston is a new start, and we are a young metro system in a teeming population that is desperately in need of those dollars. I am also a supporter of the robust funding for the FTA authority and will encourage our authorizers to ensure that transit systems outside of the large, huge cities on the East and West Coast are also considered in this formula. I support $2.5 billion for Amtrak passenger rail. I support $3.4 billion for airport improvement program, particularly Bush Intercontinental and Hobby Airport, which are in my congressional district. And I am supportive of the National Plan of Integrated Airport System. We can use those funds on more airfield capital improvements and repairs, which are greatly needed, not only in Bush Intercontinental, but the nation's airports. I support $5 billion for community development block grants, which have been the lifeline for our communities. In Houston, we're doing complete communities, trying to build back desperately overlooked cities, urban areas in our cities and counties, in rural areas, where I represent both, but overlooked areas. And we're trying to make sure that we can assist in moderate income areas to be able to build a quality of life. I support full funding for housing for the elderly. That is the Section 202 program, well needed in my community. I support the $1.7 billion, $75 billion for home investment partnership, which is the largest block grant designed to produce affordable housing for low income. I'll take this moment to mention the importance of public housing. In Houston, there are 25,000 people who have been on the waiting list for public housing combined with Section 8. This is prevailing across America, particularly dealing with the homeless persons, that I think this is a very important funding source. $32 billion for tenant-based rental assistance. That is Section 8, and that has long lines in many places, which was in essence provoked even more by COVID-19. That is the greatest issue besides COVID-19's pandemic impact, people being unhoused, being evicted, and being evicted with their whole families. I support the $57 million for fair housing initiatives, local fair housing organizations that have funded are protectors of housing rights and human rights. Support $55 billion for HUD VASH programs dealing with the rehabilitation of homes for the veterans, which we find are the most, if you will, unhoused persons, though progress has been made. Support $89 million for housing counseling assistance, $165 million for childhood-led poisoning. I support $410 million for housing opportunities for persons with AIDS. As a member of the Houston City Council, I established and helped run the first office, or help provide the funding for the first office in our community dealing with people living with AIDS. And of course, in the environmental justice aspect, I really want to emphasize the importance of the environmental injustice that's impacted in many of our neighborhoods. This includes transportation, and I will be submitting to the committee the crisis that we're having in Texas regarding I-45 and the elimination of historic housing, the promoting of bad air pollution impacting schools and millions of people living in the area, and the fact that I-45 is attempting to take out public housing. So I thank the committee for its work. It is certainly part of building back America, and I am hopefully these dollars will go forward, and we'll be able to build back America along with the projects we are speaking for. Thank you so very much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson Lee. Any questions? All right, we will thank you for your testimony, and we will conclude our hearings just as votes are called on the House floor. I want to thank all of our witnesses today for appearing before the subcommittee. Your perspectives will be useful as we assemble our bill. Appreciate your attention to the programs that we appropriate for and your testimony. I also want to thank Gladys Barcina of our staff for the work she has done to ensure that today's hearing ran smoothly. Mr. Diaz-Balart, do you have any closing comments?
Mr. Chairman, no, I concur 100% with what you have just mentioned. I think this has been a productive session. And again, I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for running a great meeting. I yield back and look forward to continuing to work together.
Yes, indeed. If there's nothing further, we will call the hearing to a close. Committee is adjourned.